Brett, tell me what you thought when you found out that SaskPower is likely not to recommend expanding the carbon capture project to other units in Saskatchewan.
I thought back to some of the research I've done and I thought, well, that's the course of action I would have recommended. It's been a good opportunity to learn about the technology. It's a first of its kind technology, so I think Saskatchewan can be proud of that. They've had a lot of interest internationally, people coming through, kicking the tires on the unit, seeing, what do you think? But without a whole bunch of other jurisdictions deciding to build those units, that price isn't going to come down. So we have lower cost ways to meet the regulations and lower emissions without having to do carbon capture right now.
And as they work towards figuring out some of those other ways, what happens with the Boundary Dam project and the carbon capture sequestration technology that we have right now? How is it useful going forward if it's so expensive?
Well, yeah, I think that's the thing. We've got to find ways to bring the cost down, because you look at all of the climate scenarios, the ways we can actually meet our targets, and most of them do have carbon capture and storage playing a role. In the future, that might be carbon capture and storage on natural gas plants. It might be carbon capture and storage on a biomass plant, where you're actually taking that biomass, capturing the CO2, putting it underground, and reducing the CO2 that's floating up in the atmosphere. So if we overshoot our targets, we're actually going to need carbon capture to reduce the concentration in the atmosphere. So there's still a use for the technology, but yeah, we've got to find ways to make it cheaper. And right now, I don't know if Saskatchewan wants to be the guinea pig for all of those experiments.
We want to get to a point of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, of course, and a big part of that is turning to renewable energy. What do you see then as the future of our energy sources, trying to meet those targets that Saskatchewan has set for going to renewables?
So in the interim, in the short term, wind is a low-cost resource. Saskatchewan has one of the best wind resources in Canada and North America. And so wind makes a lot of sense, and you've seen in SaskPower's target, they've committed to this 50% capacity being renewable by 2030. A lot of what they've said they'll do is wind, and that makes sense. You can get wind at $60 a megawatt hour. That's one of the lowest cost ways to generate electricity in Saskatchewan right now. We might see solar play a bigger role going forward. The costs have come down something like 75% since the year 2000. So now solar is about $120 to $140 a megawatt hour, which is about what carbon capture on coal is. The problem with both wind and solar is that they're not always available. So as we integrate these renewables, we have to think about, well, how do we have that backup ready to supply our needs when it's a cold, dark, calm night and we don't have the wind, we don't have the sun. So for that, we have to think about the backup. And that can be the natural gas plants in the short term, but they still release emissions. So longer term, you have to look at things like maybe it's hydroelectricity, maybe it's connecting to our neighbors. We have a lot of talk about free trade right now in the Canadian context. It'd be nice to see some more trade between Saskatchewan and Manitoba in terms of electricity. When it's windy, sell that power to Manitoba, have them slow down the flow of water through their hydro facilities. When it's not windy, you get that power from the hydro facilities in Manitoba. So there's some options there. We also see just outside of Regina, east of Regina, there's the Cowessess Wind and Storage Project. They've used a battery, lithium-ion battery, with a wind turbine, and tried to look at the combination to see, can you supply reliable power on demand with that combination? And they've shown they can do that over the course of 3 days. So we're starting to see the technologies develop, but it has to be this integrated whole systems approach. You can't just say, let's replace everything with wind. You have to see what's going to be there to back up wind.
You mentioned that you didn't think Saskatchewan wants to be the guinea pig going forward with more investigation into carbon capture. They seem to really want that, though, on the outset, that was a big investment in something that was really touted as a great initiative. So why do you think there's that switch to not wanting that now?
Well, I think it's just a matter of the number of units that have to get built. So the first wind plant, the first solar plant that was built, they're incredibly expensive. They're only cheap now because so many units have been built and we've really learned by doing. So right now a wind turbine comes out of a plant, a solar cell comes out of a plant. It's like a Model T factory assembly line. These things are standardized. They get produced in the same way, so it's low cost production. With carbon capture and storage, we need not just another 1 or 2 units to make the cost go down. We probably need hundreds of units to make the cost go down. So if we started to see the US build a lot more of these, and we might with the current administration, or if we saw China moving towards this technology, I think those would help to bring the cost down. But in the interim, we have Boundary Dam 4 and 5 we have to make a decision on soon. So I think it's from a global perspective, I don't think that the world community, should expect Saskatchewan to necessarily bear the costs of the next round of experiments.
When it comes to small businesses, would there be an opportunity for them to, say, put solar panels on the roof? Would that be a suggestion or an opportunity that might be viable for some?
Yeah, and right now, and SaskPower is going through a process of reviewing their programs for how they provide incentives for solar. So right now, if you're a residential home, if you're a small business, you can put in solar and you're generating electricity at a cost that's pretty similar, maybe lower than what you're buying it at from SaskPower. So with that program in place, it's a good business opportunity. You can kind of hedge against and protect yourself against any increases in electricity cost. So definitely there's room for businesses and households to find a business case there. I'll hope the solar keeps going down in price and we see even better business case for it in the future. But it will depend to some extent on what the next round of programs look like from SaskPower. They have to balance a few things. So it is, from the personal householder's point of view, economical to put in solar, but as a province, as I was saying, like solar's up there with Boundary Dam. And so the difference is actually in that, we buy power at 14 cents a kilowatt hour because we're paying for also the grid and all of the backup units. And so if we're not paying our bill because we've taken solar and canceled out our bill and net zeroed it, then those costs for the grid and the transmission lines, the distribution lines, they have to get paid by the other ratepayers. And so there's this challenge to try to keep electricity affordable for everybody while providing opportunities for individuals to put solar on the roof. And it might mean we have to rethink how we think about the grid. Like the grid we've paid for through these per kilowatt hour charges, but maybe we can pay for it in a different way. Maybe it's something we pay for out of general revenue and see it as a public good. It could change the way we think about electricity because these technologies are so unique. Like solar on a household, that's not the way we used to generate electricity. You had a big plant, you had wires across the province, and that's how we did it. But this is a sort of a disruptive technology. It's changing the way that the electricity system can work.
It's interesting stuff. Thanks, Brett.
Oh, you're welcome.